I was afraid to meet you. You are so horrible in that movie.
Oh, I'm a piece of cake.
You're
pal.
awful.
What if the real war behind Full Metal Jacket wasn't on screen but behind the camera? From actors pushed to the edge to secret scenes too disturbing for release, Stanley Kubrick's iconic film hides a production story as intense as the movie itself. This isn't just filmmaking, it's obsession, sacrifice, and chaos disguised as art.
Told Stanley that I would like to do Gunnery Sergeant Hartman, and he told me that he already had hired an actor.
Today, we're taking a closer look at the complex and often chaotic world behind Full Metal Jacket, one of the most talked about war films in cinema history. Directed by Stanley Kubrick, this 1987 classic is known for its harsh realism, psychological depth, and visual precision. But what many people don't realize is that what happened behind the scenes was just as intense as what made it to the screen. Before we go any further, here's your reminder to subscribe to our channel so you never miss out on your daily dose of TV bloopers. While the film itself is often remembered for its two-part structure, the brutal Marine Corps boot camp followed by the disillusioning reality of war in Vietnam, the production journey told its own story. It was filled with extreme performances, tense working relationships, and the obsessive perfectionism that Kubrick was both admired and criticized for. In this video, we're going to dig into some of the more surprising facts from that time, starting with a few scenes that never made it to the final cut. It's hard to imagine Full Metal Jacket being even more graphic than what we saw, but according to various reports, Kubrick actually removed certain scenes because they were deemed too disturbing, even by his own standards. One of the most notorious was a scene involving a football match where soldiers used a severed human head instead of a ball. It was intended to illustrate the mental and moral decline of soldiers in wartime, but it ended up being cut entirely. Another scene that didn't make the final version showed Animal Mother decapitating the female Vietnamese sniper after her capture. In the version we know, she's killed more mercifully, but the original approach was far more gruesome. The decision to omit these moments speaks volumes about Kubrick's editorial judgment. Even for a film known for its raw violence, there were boundaries he chose not to cross on screen. Moving from what was left out to what was painfully put in, we can't talk about the making of Full Metal Jacket without bringing up Vincent D'Onofrio. He played Private Leonard Lawrence, better known by his nickname Pyle, and went through an extreme physical transformation to embody the character. D'Onofrio reportedly gained around 75 pounds, more than 34 kilograms, for the role. At the time, it was the most weight ever gained by an actor for a film role. He later spoke about how the weight gain changed how people treated him in everyday life. In interviews, he recalled how strangers assumed he was unintelligent and how women avoided him entirely. His self-esteem took a hit, and it wasn't just emotional. The physical toll was real too. The added weight caused serious stress on his knees, resulting in injuries that required surgery. All of this speaks to a level of commitment that went far beyond method acting and into real physical sacrifice. What's more, his transformation was more than just weight. D'Onofrio, known for being reserved, had to portray someone slipping into a psychological crisis under extreme pressure. The journey from awkward recruit to deeply disturbed soldier was not just convincing, it was disturbing in its realism. This wasn't an easy role to watch, let alone perform, and D'Onofrio's performance remains one of the most memorable in the film. Another fascinating story from the production centers on R. Lee Ermey, who played Gunnery Sergeant Hartman. Initially, he was brought on simply as a technical advisor, thanks to his own background as a real Marine Corps drill instructor. However, Ermey had a unique way of getting noticed. He insisted on doing a tape of himself performing the role, filled with real drill sergeant insults, commands, and discipline. Kubrick reportedly found the audition so convincing that he decided to cast him in the role directly, replacing the actor who had already been hired and had spent months preparing. This sudden change caused some confusion and reportedly upset some cast and crew members, but the decision ended up being one of the defining moments of the film's production. Ermey's performance was so authentic that much of his dialogue was improvised, something Kubrick almost never allowed. Ermey's scenes set the tone for the entire first half of the movie. His intense delivery, perfectly timed insults, and commanding presence brought a frightening realism to the boot camp environment. It was later revealed that he wrote over 150 pages of insults and motivational lines, tailoring his dialogue to push the actors into genuinely uncomfortable territory. His approach created an atmosphere where the actors felt real stress, which added a layer of authenticity to their performances. But behind all of these performances was Kubrick himself, known for being deeply controlling on set. There's a story involving Matthew Modine, who played Private Joker, that reveals just how far Kubrick's control extended. During production, Modine's wife required emergency surgery, and he informed Kubrick that he needed to go to the hospital. Rather than offering immediate support or approval, Kubrick reportedly tried to convince Modine to stay, listing various reasons why it was a bad time to leave the production. According to Modine, the conversation escalated to the point where he threatened to harm himself with a knife if he wasn't allowed to go. The most unsettling part? Modine wasn't even scheduled to shoot that day. Incidents like these have led to ongoing debates about Kubrick's leadership style. Some see it as dedication to his craft, while others describe it as a kind of manipulative control. Either way, it's clear that working on a Kubrick film wasn't easy. He expected complete immersion even when it came at a personal cost to his actors. Another piece of Kubrick's approach that often goes under the radar is his attention to recurring symbols and hidden details. While he wasn't exactly known for modern-style Easter eggs, there's an odd pattern that connects four of his most iconic films: 2001: A Space Odyssey, A Clockwork Orange, The Shining, and Full Metal Jacket. In each of these films, diamonds or diamond-shaped objects appear prominently. Specifically, the number 7 keeps turning up. 7 diamonds, 7 shapes. No one has ever confirmed exactly what this means, and Kubrick never explained it publicly. But many believe that these small touches were a kind of signature, perhaps a personal motif that pointed to a deeper philosophy, or simply an artistic quirk. Whether symbolic or not, they are yet another example of how meticulously Kubrick crafted every frame of his films. All of these details, cutscenes, personal sacrifices, improvised brilliance, behind-the-scenes tensions, and unexplained symbols, form a picture of a film production that was anything but ordinary. Full Metal Jacket might look like a tightly controlled masterpiece on the surface, but beneath that precision was a set filled with risk, discomfort, and sometimes outright chaos. It's this blend of calculated direction and raw, unpredictable human experience that makes the film so unique and its creation so fascinating. Vincent D'Onofrio's role as Private Pyle is one of the most powerful in the film, and the effort he put into becoming that character is nearly impossible to overstate. When he was cast, D'Onofrio wasn't the big name he is today. He was still early in his career, and knew he had to do something significant to stand out. Gaining weight for a role isn't unusual, but in D'Onofrio's case, the scale was extreme. He gained about 75 pounds, more than 34 kilograms, to fully embody the physical presence of a struggling, overweight recruit. At the time, it was the most weight ever gained by an actor for a role in a major film. The effects of this transformation were felt in every aspect of his life. D'Onofrio has spoken candidly in interviews about how his appearance changed the way people treated him. Strangers assumed he was unintelligent, often repeating themselves when they spoke to him. In public, he noticed people avoided looking at him, and he said that women in particular would often walk away from him without making eye contact. These aren't just minor inconveniences, they reflect how society treats people based on appearances, something the actor felt deeply during that period. It wasn't just a mental strain either. Carrying that much extra weight took a real toll on his health. During production, D'Onofrio injured his knees so badly that he needed surgery. He was still relatively young at the time, and the damage from the role stayed with him long after filming wrapped. It's not an exaggeration to say he sacrificed his body for this performance. But it wasn't only D'Onofrio who went through something intense. R. Lee Ermey's story is just as remarkable, especially considering he was never meant to play the role of Gunnery Sergeant Hartman. Ermey was a former Marine drill instructor, originally hired as a technical advisor to ensure authenticity in the boot camp scenes. But Ermey had other plans. He believed he could do more than just advise. He wanted to be in front of the camera. To prove his point, Ermey put together a homemade audition tape. In it, he dressed in full military uniform and delivered a barrage of real-life insults and commands. He shouted at people off-camera, threw props, and demonstrated exactly how a real drill instructor would behave. The tape was so convincing that Kubrick, known for being extremely selective with his actors, changed his mind and cast Ermey in the role. This decision meant removing another actor who had already spent months preparing for the part. It wasn't a typical Hollywood move, but it turned out to be one of Kubrick's most effective casting choices. Ermey's performance became one of the film's standout elements, and many of his lines have since become iconic. The way Ermey prepared for the role also says a lot about the production's atmosphere. He reportedly wrote over 150 pages of insults and military dialogue. Kubrick, impressed by the level of detail and realism, allowed him to improvise. A rare move for the famously controlling director. This improvisation gave the character of Hartman an edge that felt completely authentic. The actors weren't just responding to a script, they were reacting to real verbal pressure, often with real discomfort. The high-pressure environment wasn't limited to physical training or military routines. Tensions also grew between the actors, especially between Matthew Modine, who played Private Joker, and D'Onofrio. Their on-screen relationship is difficult, but off-camera things weren't much smoother. Modine came from a different acting background than D'Onofrio. While D'Onofrio trained using the Lee Strasberg method, which involves deeply immersing yourself in the character's mindset, Modine followed the Stella Adler approach, which relies more on imagination and less on personal experience. These differences led to tension on set, especially as D'Onofrio began to stay in character, even when the cameras weren't rolling. Modine has since said that at times he felt genuinely uncomfortable around his co-star. He even wondered whether some of the scenes, like the brutal towel-beating moment, were fueled by personal tension rather than just acting. It's important to note that the two have remained friends, which speaks to the professional respect they built over time. But during filming, the environment was intense and often emotionally taxing. Kubrick's directing style also added to the strain. While some directors work quickly and spontaneously, Kubrick was famous for doing dozens of takes until a scene felt exactly right. This could be exhausting, especially when filming emotionally heavy material. There's a well-known story about Ermey, whose background as a real Marine gave him a reputation for perfection. While he could often nail his lines in 2 or 3 takes, there was one scene that stood out. The jelly donut scene. In that moment, where he punishes a recruit for eating a forbidden treat, Kubrick reportedly made him do 37 takes. Even for someone as well prepared as Ermey, it was a challenge. It's a good example of Kubrick's commitment to precision, and how that commitment sometimes pushed people to their limits. The emotional weight of the film extended beyond the acting techniques. There was also real-life drama involving the cast and the director. One of the more serious moments came when Matthew Modine had a personal emergency. His wife needed urgent surgery, and he informed Kubrick that he needed to be with her. Kubrick, rather than immediately supporting him, reportedly tried to talk him out of leaving. Modine became so frustrated with the situation that he reportedly pulled out a knife and threatened to harm himself just to be allowed to go. It later came out that Modine wasn't even scheduled to film that day. The incident speaks to how controlling Kubrick could be and the kind of emotional environment that surrounded the production. A strange and unpredictable event came from the world of casting. Modine was ultimately cast as Joker, but it didn't happen in the usual way. According to interviews, it all started when actor Val Kilmer made a sarcastic comment to Modine at a restaurant. Kilmer, having lost several roles to Modine, reportedly said something like, "Now you're even doing the Kubrick film?" The thing was, Modine wasn't doing the Kubrick film at that point, but the comment got him thinking, and he followed up by sending an audition tape through his manager. That chance encounter ended up being the first step in him getting the role. It's a reminder of how unpredictable Hollywood can be, and how sometimes the right role comes from the most unlikely moment. These stories show a side of Full Metal Jacket that most audiences never get to see. Behind the polished shots and iconic lines was a production full of pressure, emotion, and unpredictable moments. Kubrick demanded more than just strong performances. He wanted complete immersion from his actors. For some, like Ermi and D'Onofrio, it was a life-changing opportunity. For others, it was a deeply taxing experience that left a lasting impact. But the result was a film that still resonates today, in part because of the emotional truth that came from those intense, sometimes painful moments during filming. One of the most recognizable visual elements in Full Metal Jacket is Private Joker's helmet. It's marked with two symbols, the words "Born to Kill" and a peace sign button. At first glance, it might seem like a contradiction, or maybe even a joke. But this was intentional. The helmet represents what Joker later refers to as the duality of man, a philosophical idea that people are capable of both peace and violence. It's one of the clearest examples of Kubrick using costume design to express deeper meaning. But the symbolism doesn't end there. In one key scene, just before Joker is forced to mercy kill the Vietnamese sniper, he subtly shifts his body so that his hand covers the peace sign. In that moment, the pacifist part of him is hidden, and the violent side takes control. It's a small movement, easy to miss, but full of meaning. Kubrick didn't just want viewers to hear about duality, he wanted them to see it happen in real time. This level of detail extended into the technical aspects of the film too. In one of the early scenes, where Sergeant Hartman walks around the new recruits barking orders and insults, the camera moves in a full 360-degree motion. That kind of shot creates a significant challenge because it limits where lighting equipment can be placed. You can't hide lights behind the camera if the camera is constantly moving. Kubrick's solution? He had 24,000 watts of lighting power placed outside every window to simulate natural daylight. That's enough electricity to power several homes, all used for a few minutes of screen time. It's an example of how Kubrick often chose the harder, more expensive path if it gave him the exact result he wanted. Kubrick's approach to light and space wasn't about showing off technical skill, it was about realism. Even though Full Metal Jacket is visually stylized in many ways, the director wanted the environments to feel grounded and authentic. This led to another interesting decision. Because he had a fear of flying, Kubrick refused to leave the UK, so rather than film in Southeast Asia, he recreated Vietnam in England. That might sound impossible, but he pulled it off. He chose locations in East London that resembled bombed-out cities, including a former gasworks that had already been scheduled for demolition. Then, he had over 200 palm trees shipped in from California, along with more than 100,000 tropical plants from Hong Kong. The idea was to recreate the heat, look, and atmosphere of Vietnam, even if the actual location was thousands of miles away. For Kubrick, authenticity didn't necessarily mean filming in the real place. It meant making every detail believable. Of course, Kubrick's eye for detail often went well beyond production design. He was known for placing subtle, sometimes mysterious elements in his films. Things that didn't always have a clear explanation. One example from Full Metal Jacket is a background sign in the military conference room that reads, "We will defend to the death our right to be misinformed." At the time of the film's release in 1987, that line probably felt like dark humor or a jab at the military-industrial complex. But in today's media landscape, with widespread misinformation and fake news becoming daily concerns, the sign feels oddly prophetic. Whether Kubrick was predicting the future or just commenting on timeless human behavior, he had a way of inserting quiet, sharp observations into the background of his films. There are other elements of visual storytelling that viewers might miss on first watch. For example, a building that appears in the background during Cowboy's death scene resembles the monolith from 2001: A Space Odyssey, one of Kubrick's earlier films. This led some fans to believe that the director was including a hidden reference, maybe suggesting a deeper connection between his work. But when asked about it, Kubrick dismissed the theory, saying it was purely accidental. Still, the fact that people were so quick to search for hidden meanings says a lot about his reputation as a filmmaker. With Kubrick, people expect layers. Sometimes they find them, and sometimes they create them themselves. There was also a more deliberate hidden reference in the character of Gomer Pyle. His nickname, given to him by Sergeant Hartman, wasn't randomly chosen. It was a direct reference to the television character Gomer Pyle from the American sitcom Gomer Pyle, USMC, a show that portrayed military life in a light-hearted, family-friendly way. The real Gomer was clumsy but kind-hearted, a comedic version of military discipline. And there is not a Kubrick's use of the name was no accident. He was drawing a contrast between the Hollywood version of the armed forces that many Americans had grown up watching and the much darker, more brutal reality depicted in his film. It was a subtle commentary on how pop culture often sanitizes war, turning it into something far removed from actual experience. Another small but powerful choice was the name sewn onto Joker's uniform, J.T. Davis. This name is never mentioned in the film, but if you look closely, it appears during the obstacle course scene. J.T. Davis was the first American soldier to die in ground combat during the Vietnam War. Including that name wasn't just a creative decision, it was a tribute. It grounded the fictional story in real-life history and served as a quiet memorial to one of the earliest casualties of a war that would claim thousands of lives. Casting also played a huge role in the film's layered impact. Originally, Kubrick had plans to work with more well-known names. Several A-list actors were approached for roles, but ultimately turned them down. Arnold Schwarzenegger reportedly passed on the role of Animal Mother to do The Running Man. Denzel Washington declined the role of 8-Ball due to Kubrick's refusal to send out full scripts. Anthony Michael Hall was attached to play Joker but dropped out over a pay dispute. Bruce Willis was too busy filming Moonlighting, and Ed Harris turned down the part of Sergeant Hartman, a decision he later regretted. In the end, the lack of household names gave the film a sense of rawness. The unfamiliar faces made it easier to believe that these were real soldiers, not movie stars playing roles. Kubrick's own daughter, Vivian, also had a small but notable part in the film's legacy. Working under the alias Abigail Mead, she composed the haunting score that runs throughout the film. She also made a brief on-screen appearance as the photographer, documenting the mass grave, standing beside Joker and Rafterman. Beyond that, Vivian filmed more than 18 hours of behind-the-scenes footage for a proposed documentary on the making of Full Metal Jacket. The footage has never been officially released, which only adds to the mystique surrounding Kubrick's famously private productions. Even the film's title came from a moment of chance. The movie is based on The Short Timers, a novel by Gustav Hasford, who also co-wrote the screenplay. But Kubrick didn't like the idea of using the book's title. He felt it sounded like a reference to part-time jobs. Instead, he was flipping through a gun catalogue when he came across the phrase, Full Metal Jacket, which refers to a type of bullet casing. He liked the way it sounded and decided it would be the new title. It's another example of Kubrick combining careful planning with spontaneous inspiration. Taken together, all these details, whether symbolic, technical, or emotional, reveal how deeply layered Full Metal Jacket really is. Kubrick's approach to filmmaking wasn't just about creating a good movie, it was about building a complete world. Every symbol, every casting choice, and every technical challenge was part of a bigger picture. For audiences, the result is a film that rewards close viewing and rewatching. For the cast and crew, it was often a difficult experience, but one that left behind something extraordinary. For many, it's remembered as a brutal war film, with unforgettable performances and sharp visual storytelling. But beneath the surface, It represents the culmination of Stanley Kubrick's lifelong commitment to detail, control, and the exploration of human behavior under pressure. The final batch of behind-the-scenes stories gives us a deeper understanding of the film's lasting impact, the emotional fallout for those involved, and the small decisions that shaped the way we remember it today. One of the most interesting production choices Kubrick made was how he structured the shooting schedule. Although the film's storyline begins with boot camp and then moves to Vietnam, the scenes were filmed in the opposite order. The Vietnam sequences were shot first, followed by the training scenes at Paris Island. This reversed filming schedule meant that the actors had to essentially work backwards through their characters' development. By the time they were filming the early scenes in the story, they had already gone through their characters' entire arcs. For actors like Matthew Modine, who played Joker, this required a high level of emotional control and internal consistency. They had to appear less hardened and more naive, even though they had already filmed the scenes where their characters had been pushed to emotional extremes. It's a subtle detail, but one that reflects Kubrick's often unorthodox approach to storytelling and performance. One of the more powerful and little-known details in the film involves the name tag on Private Joker's uniform. If you look closely during the obstacle course scene, you'll see the name J.T. Davis stitched into the fabric. This isn't a made-up name. It refers to specialist James T. Davis, who is recognized as the first American soldier to die in ground combat during the Vietnam War. Including his name was a quiet tribute, one that most viewers wouldn't catch, but that adds emotional weight to Joker's character. It's a way of grounding the fictional story in real-life history, giving it a layer of meaning that goes beyond the narrative. There were other moments in the film where hidden meaning and real emotion overlapped. Take, for instance, the jelly donut scene, where Sergeant Hartman punishes the recruits for one man's mistake. That scene is remembered for its harshness, but also for how long it took to film. R. Lee Ermey, who usually completed scenes in just a few takes, had to shoot this one 37 times before Kubrick was satisfied. According to those involved in the production, it wasn't just a matter of getting the lines right. It was about hitting the exact emotional tone with the right rhythm, lighting, and physical tension. It became one of the most draining scenes to film, even for an actor as prepared as Ermey. Speaking of Ermey, his presence on set wasn't just for show. He had a significant impact on the cast, particularly because of the way Kubrick chose to introduce him. To make the experience feel authentic, the actors playing recruits were not allowed to meet Ermey before filming. There were no rehearsals with him, no table reads, and no conversations between takes. Kubrick instructed Ermey to stay in character and remain separate from the rest of the cast. As a result, the fear and confusion you see on the actors' faces when Hartman is shouting at them is completely real. They were genuinely intimidated. Some even admitted they were unsure if they were being filmed or if it was just part of a psychological warm-up. It created an atmosphere where the line between performance and reality was often blurred. Kubrick was known for his control, but there were moments on set that revealed a very different side of him. One of the more unexpected stories from the production involves a family of rabbits. During a scene that involved controlled explosions, a group of rabbits was accidentally killed. Kubrick, who was known to be deeply attached to animals, was reportedly devastated. He halted production for the entire day. It's a surprising reaction from a director often seen as emotionally distant, especially given the harsh material in the film, but it shows a more complex personality, a man capable of both extreme artistic focus and deep compassion. That complexity also extended to his relationships with collaborators. Matthew Modine, for example, kept a detailed diary during production, documenting his experiences on set. Normally, Kubrick was fiercely protective of what happened behind the scenes. He often insisted on secrecy and discouraged documentation. But in this case, he allowed Modine to continue writing, reportedly encouraging it as a method of staying in character. The result was Full Metal Jacket Diary, a limited edition book that includes personal notes, behind-the-scenes stories, and even a metal jacket cover. It remains one of the few personal accounts from someone who worked closely with Kubrick. offering insights into both the film and the man behind it. Another personal connection comes from Vivian Kubrick, the director's daughter. Not only did she compose the film's score under the name Abigail Mead, but she also appeared briefly in the film as a war photographer. Beyond that, she shot over 18 hours of behind-the-scenes footage for a potential documentary on the making of the film. That footage has never been officially released. What's on those tapes remains unknown, but many believe it contains a more candid look at Kubrick's process, perhaps too candid for release. It's one of the many mysteries that continues to surround the film and its legacy. There were other surprises too, including the origin of the film's title. The movie is based on Gustav Hasford's novel, The Short-Timers, but Kubrick didn't like that title. He worried people would confuse it with a story about part-time jobs. While flipping through a gun catalogue, he came across the phrase "full metal jacket," referring to a type of bullet casing, and decided it was the perfect fit. The title has since become iconic, but its origin was almost entirely accidental. Just another reminder that inspiration can come from the most unlikely places. Kubrick's relationship with Hasford, the original author, didn't go smoothly. The two met only once, at a dinner that reportedly ended with Kubrick passing a note to a colleague that said, "I can't deal with this man." The working relationship eventually turned into a legal dispute over screenplay credits. Hasford, a Vietnam veteran, wanted full recognition for his contribution. Although Kubrick had already paid for the rights to the book, the argument was about how credit was shared. In the end, Hasford did receive a full screenwriting credit, but the conflict was yet another example of the high tensions that surrounded Kubrick's productions. In terms of long-lasting impact, Full Metal Jacket helped reshape how war films were made and received. While Oliver Stone's Platoon came out first and won the Academy Award, Full Metal Jacket offered a more psychologically driven portrayal of soldiers. Its influence can be seen in many films that came after, particularly those that focused more on the internal effects of war rather than large-scale battles. The boot camp scenes in particular have been parodied, referenced and studied for decades, with R. Lee Ermey's performance becoming a cultural touchstone. And yet, despite all the recognition, there's still a feeling that parts of the film and its making remain hidden. Whether it's Vivian's unseen footage, Modine's unreleased diary entries, or the discarded scenes that Kubrick decided were too disturbing even for his own standards, there's a sense that Full Metal Jacket continues to live beyond the frame. Like many of Kubrick's films, it rewards repeat viewings, careful analysis, and long conversation. In the end, Full Metal Jacket isn't just a war film. It's a character study, a philosophical statement, and a technical achievement. It's also the product of extreme dedication by the director, the cast, and the crew. The stories behind the scenes are sometimes inspiring, sometimes troubling, and often unbelievable, but they all contribute to a film that still stands as one of the most complex and enduring depictions of war ever put on screen.